call this meeting of the WSESU Board called to order. And I would like to take nominations for the election of the board chair. I'll second. Second? Any other nominations?
I got a nomination. Bob Woodward.
Nominated, I will not run, and selected, I will not serve. That's been said.
I withdraw my nomination.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor of Amy as the WSESU Board Chair, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you, Amy.
Thank you, everybody. So I entertain nominations for a board vice chair.
Ruth is the vice chair. Aren't you, Ruth, you are.
I nominate Ruth. Second.
Seconded, I'm sorry. Is it Gina? Any other nominations? All those in favor of Ruth as vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Okay, nominations for board clerk. The most important job.
I nominate Kim Price.
I second.
Okay, Mark.
Kim, are you willing to continue?
Said yeah.
Any other nominations? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of Kim Price as board clerk, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Kim, you have our unending thanks.
Yes.
Okay, we move on to approval of minutes from December 10th, which seems ages ago.
I move approval of the minutes of December 10th.
Second? Second. Gina? Any comments or corrections? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor of the minutes of December 10th as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Abstain? Okay.
Sorry.
All right. And communications. We've got a couple of communications. One was a letter dated May 9th from the state's Title I program coordinator Beth Meyer, commending Paul Smith and Lyle Holliday for all the time and effort they put forth to make sure Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union is compliant with the federal requirements for the consolidated federal program, Title I, Part A, Equitable Services. So, nice job.
Yeah. Just a comment that, our district is in really a good place because of people like Paul and Lyle and Frank. Because it's not stated in there, but Frank's kind of behind the scenes with all the credit programs. So we get a lot of money in, we need to spend it the right way, and we do in terms of providing good services for students and families.
And then we have another nice letter from the Vermont Council of Special Education Administrators. And it's very pleasant to announce that Marissa Duncan Holly was selected as the Special Education Administrator of the Year for this year.
So I would just say, if you want to pass that letter around, there's an award letter that was directed to me based on her nomination, and then I included in my nomination letter with some details about Marisa. And this is her 9th year in our district. We are, again, very fortunate to have somebody of her capability and perseverance, team player, really watching out for the interests of our students. And we were really fortunate, and I'm so glad that she got the recognition that she deserved last Thursday night. So, thank you.
And let's see, we have 2 visitors, I think. Actually, 1 visitor, really. Ines, you're just here, are you here for a specific reason or just to observe? And then we have the Vernon principal, right? Okay, great. Well, thank you for coming.
And if you'd like seats, we can.
Oh, that's fine. Okay. All right, so committee reports. Russ, do you want to give us the lowdown on the finance committee?
Well, I think we're going to be talking today about the audit and other things. We've talked about health insurance and other things that I think all the other boards are doing. But what I'd like to do is to move the warrants that are listed on the agenda from meetings of December 9th, totaling $38,281.60. Warrants on December 22nd, totaling $849,080.34. On January 13th, totaling $294,010.11. Oh, there are a lot, aren't there? And et cetera, as shown on here. I mean, I've actually skipped a whole within each one. So there are all of those good front there, good warrants. There are payrolls that are typically twice a month, Bryce in April, and then a few American Express wire transfers that we're trying to cut down on those. The last one February through March. So I'd like to move all of those warrants, wire transfers, and American Express as shown on the agenda. The payrolls as well.
I second what he said.
And can you just explain for the new members on the SU board how these get vetted so that we don't
What
get
we-
blindly?
Lately, what we've been doing is we've been getting them in PDF form in advance, and so that we can review them. Mainly the warrants, the wire transfers, and the payrolls we see at the meetings themselves. And we meet once a month, twice a month in busy seasons, or even more during budgets. So we get a preview of them through PDFs, and then I imagine it's the same at all the boards and the budget committees. And then we review them, ask questions, and we've always, in my dozen years or so, we've always ratified them. So Frank answers questions as they come up. And it's a use for the new members. It's a little daunting to get these very thick things with very big numbers. But going through them, looking at the numbers and just looking at items, you really do pick up on some of the things that are going on. So what are these with, real relaxation, different tuitions, just questions come up. So that's what we do, and ask questions and then ratify.
So when typically, I mean, I've been around for a while, but wire transfers, American Express, when someone hears that, it's like, what's that for? What do they typically use the wire, their American Express wire transfer?
Frank can probably answer. I'll take a quick guess, which is often at meetings and things like that, where a credit card is
That's right.
useful as opposed to a purchase order.
So when there's a conference and the entity requires a credit card for confirmation of payment and the reservation, and that is generally what it's for.
Why is it a wire transfer?
It's just a very old term that would be good to.
So it's not it's a misnomer.
update.
It's not a true wire transfer.
It is actually, the payment mechanism is to transfer funds from Wyndham Southeast to American Express via wire. So, you know, it's just an old term.
Does it come with the typical wire transfer fee?
There is, it's just part of our banking services.
So it's online banking, it's not a wire transfer?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So why would we?
I think the wire transfers for
Wi-Fi.
When we, well, actually, any other questions about the warrants, the payrolls, and the American Express wire transfers? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of warrants, payrolls, and American Express wire transfers as listed, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? I didn't, when we started the meeting, I should have gone around and introduced ourselves, but we all have name tags, so I guess if, I don't know, does it make any sense to go around and introduce so that the new members recognize everybody, or are we good with the name tags? Okay, name tags are good, okay, so we'll keep going. Any other unfinished or financial stuff, Frank, or
Well,
in this section?
I know we want to talk about the education support staff agreement. Don't know if we wanted to do that under finance, compensation now or later under business.
You want to do it now?
Yeah, why don't we
Okay.
do that? So Frank and I just met with representatives of each board for the ESP contract. And as I said to that group, the last contract they had was a 2-year settlement. And I would say in the spring of last year, I meet on a regular basis monthly with the association reps. And I think it was in the spring that a couple of the support staff people asked if we could have some informal conversations about a settlement, thinking about a 1-year settlement, especially with the health insurance, how it changes after this next year. So Frank and I had a couple of meetings with them and then continued in the fall. And I was very clear with the group that the impact couldn't be over a 2.5% increase. We had budgeted that in our in budgets for this coming year, the next year. And so as we continued these discussions, they felt it was important to, and I don't know if we have enough of these salary schedules.
No, I didn't make
If
enough
we,
for
if we
everybody,
could,
but-
some of the people as reps have them. If you're at a table, you can put your hand up, Mark, and then Aaron. And so maybe if you could bring them to tables. Well, Vernon isn't in the agreement, but you can take a look at that to get them. Does every table have this schedule?
Couple more?
Couple more? Oh, we should. So the other thing I realized is this should be an executive session. So I'm sorry that we're going to ask BCTV to just click that off.
Do we need a motion to do?
Yes, we do. But I want to alert him.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I need a motion to go into executive session for a contractual matter.
I move that we go into executive session for contractual matter.
Okay.
I will second that.
Thank you, Ruth. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Okay, we are in executive session.
So again, this is not. Yeah, it's because the support staff contract should go out, probably beginning of June. Ideally, it would have been nice to do the finance committee first and then the SU board. I'd hate to have to reschedule a full board meeting, 2 weeks. But there is pressure on the contracts out.
And we word the approval motion such that pending anything from the finance.
4 to 5, so it's kind of like,
Right, so can they, they can't actually meet, can they, without being warned?
That's being warned.
Can they meet right now and give an opinion without?
What's that?
They can't meet officially right during this meeting, but we could have on record that the finance forum.
Oh, no, I was saying the representative group, the board members that represent the contract, that would be warned. You're asking about something.
Jill was wondering, since they're all sitting right there right now, can they have a de facto meeting since they're all sort of talking to each other?
Well, I don't think they can have a de facto meeting, but we can have it on record that the 4 of the 5 finance committee members are in favor of this proposal or this motion if we made it.
There's 6.
4 of 6. Just so we continue with normal procedures all. And then we can still vote.
but the money's is already in the budget.
Yes.
So it's not like we're,
Well, it's, yeah, but you're
It's
talking about an approval
anticipated.
process. I mean, I guess I feel like you'd just be inserting another step that really isn't legitimate at this point, because the vote of the board is going to indicate how the finance committee reps feel about it.
Can it be verified by this group?
Pending the
Contingent upon the
agreement of
finance
the-
committee 2 days hence.
Yeah, that would be fine.
That was my original question.
Okay, I didn't hear it.
So that can be done.
Yeah, so let's put the motion approving the extension for a year pending the approval of the finance committee next coming Wednesday.
so moved.
So, yeah, I'll second that. Nice wording, please.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, great, thank you.
All right. Any other financial business? So we'll go on to unfinished business. Act 46 is the next thing on the topic, or on the agenda. You want to give an update there? or-
Yeah, so Alice could not be here tonight. And I think all boards received a letter from Rebecca Holcomb. I made copies. So I think there's probably at least 2 or 3 enough for the table, and you guys should probably have one. I think you've seen it. So I consulted with Alice today when she thought she was actually going to be able to make the meeting. There's probably enough for public. So there is a study committee meeting scheduled for this coming Thursday in Putney at 6 o'clock. So there'll be more discussion around this at that time. But as you take a look at this letter, all I want to do is spend a little time on the first paragraph. You can read the rest of it, and then it essentially restates it at the end of the letter. But in response to Alice's inquiry, this is from Rebecca Holcomb from Secretary of Education. In response to your inquiry, the Vernon School Board has no legal authority to withdraw the Vernon School District or the district's statutorily appointed members from the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union Study Committee. The Vernon School Board's recent vote neither dissolves the study committee nor affects the nature of its work. If the study committee ultimately decides to recommend formation of a union school district, then it may choose to name the Vernon School District as either a necessary district or an advisable district pursuant to 16 VSA 706B, even if the Vernon appointees choose not to continue to participate. Later on in the letter, she encourages the Vernon representatives to, in fact, continue on the study committee. The thing that I realize, and our legal consultant, Chris Leopold, is been working on with us. And the Vernon Board actually discussed it at, I'm not sure if it was this past meeting a few minutes ago, but I know the last meeting that I attended 2 weeks ago. What our attorney is saying is there's really two paths, and there might be more, but two paths that we want to spend some time on next Thursday, this coming Thursday. One would be if Vernon votes to be out of the BUHS district, and that allows the rest of the districts to do a unified union district. So that's one path. So if Vernon said, you know, we really want to go alone, we want to maintain our school choice, that would be an approach, and it would not hamper the rest of the districts from becoming a unified district. The timing of that would be, you know, something probably in the summer, in the early fall. That would essentially be a conventional with the 8, 6, 4, 2 cent tax incentive. The other option would be if the study committee pushed ahead and said, well, all districts were going to be necessary, or certain districts would be necessary or advisable, and that would push a vote for November. I think based on the discussions that I've had with the Vernon Board, it seems like it makes more sense if they choose and they want to go as a single district out of the BUHS district, they would vote to that. They would still send their students to BUHS, and they would have the choice available as long as the state board continued that, or statute. And then it does not impede the other districts from becoming a unified district. At some point in the future, if Vernon wanted to join the unified district, that would be a possibility. So that's what we're asking Chris Leopold to look at when he redrafts our draft agreement, the study committee agreements.
Now, is it clear to all the boards that if we vote to be removed from the high school union, that it requires all the other towns to vote in the affirmative?
Actually, what we're seeing is if when you do that, if you have an affirmative vote to leave, the next vote would be to create a union district. So there wouldn't have to be that double vote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's what we're learning pretty recently.
All right, so then what would occur is Vernon would vote to be out of the high school union.
Yeah.
And then when the other body voted to be unified district, they would in essence be voting Vernon out.
Exactly.
Okay.
What statute is that in?
It's Act 46. Act 46, essentially that's what Act 46 does, is it undoes the requirement to have a vote to disband the union high schools in the state. But that time frame is only available until July of 2017. So
I
Act 46.
thought that was the MUD that did that.
That's right, it's all part of
So
Act
it's not
46.
Act 46.
Act 46 has that provision to create the modified union, but also to allow essentially a union, a Brattleboro Union High School, any union high school to be modified.
So it's a MUD, is what you're saying. It's not conventional. It's a MUD.
They're not, you know, Donna Russo Savage from the agency vet is not calling it a MUD anymore. I know, it's a unified union school district, as opposed to a modified union district.
And the reason is because if Vernon exits from the union, then you're forming a new union. You're not modifying. You know, Vernon's vote would do that, and Act 46 allows for a new union to reform an existing union high school.
So one thing that I know Alice would like to do, and I would join her, is have a meeting with the Vernon Board just to kind of get a sense of where you want to go. If it's the first option, we want to make sure that we support that, and then it doesn't tie up the rest of the unified.
Well, as you know from our discussions, the last thing Vernon wants to do is tie up the rest of the group. We've always had a good partnership with all the other towns. We still look at them as partners, and we would after
Right.
with contracting. as far as the first paragraph, we're still trying to determine, the last thing we want to do is go to court.
Yeah.
So I will be meeting with legal counsel this week to find out if indeed we should attend or not. So it'll be on the advice of counsel. But I would not want that to stand in the way of what you're proposing, because that's exactly what Vernon desires, is to maintain school choice, but still have a working relationship with the supervisory union. Because it is, as you know, it's been respected as one of the best supervisory unions in the state. We don't want to be completely disassociated.
So that, I mean, I think that's pretty hopeful.
Walter, now the Vernon residents have to vote?
Yes, they would.
So what if the Vernon residents say, no, we don't want to leave?
Yep, then that kind of changes the
That changes.
landscape. Yep, and quite frankly, then you get to know how the taxpayers or the residents feel.
At this point, it's about 30 people that I've spoken to one. So I would think it would probably pass, but as Ron said, we'd have to see.
The other approach, and then I know Walter has a comment, is if the study committee said, okay, so let's name everybody as necessary to force the vote, well, the vote's going to happen anyway. And I'd rather have it where this is the approach that you favor as a town. Let the town decide and then go from there. And if the town decides, no, they don't want to break out of the union, then everybody then would be necessary.
How's the bond and everything?
What's that?
The high school bond and all the finances?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Leopold is working with Paul Giuliani to look at the debt and the assets. Districts that have done this, it's kind of a wash.
Right, where they, you know, any district has a liability to pay the union debt as they do today, but they also have a ownership in the assets. And the point is that if we paid fair value for the asset with the debt, then you know one washes the other out. The liability is the same as the asset, I believe.
I just had a logistics question. Does Alice want to meet before Thursday's meeting?
No. She suggested either next Tuesday, the 31st, I think it is, or possibly at your next board meeting, June 13th. If we could do it next Tuesday, that would be great.
Well, board members, what do you think? I think the sooner we have these discussions, the better it is for everyone. So are we all available on that Tuesday?
That's the 31st.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 That's
Yes.
great. 6 o'clock?
If you want to warn that would be fine.
Thank you. So that's all I have.
I'm still, for me, I mean, I was just a member of the study committee sitting there listening, and Walter was there, and then the next thing I saw was in the paper that you'd sent the letter. Why did you go that route instead of coming and talking with the study committee and explaining what you're saying now?
Well, I think when we discussed it with our legal counsel, that was the advice of legal counsel to protect the town and from any harm or damage done to the town or to the school. And we acted upon his counsel, and that's why we were through.
Does that go along with the freedom of information request too? I mean, it was all a little bit confusing. You know,
Freedom of-
sitting on that study committee.
There is a group in the state that is considering a class action suit, and it involves several different areas in the state. In fact, in 2 weeks, I'm meeting up in Franklin County to discuss 46 with some people up there. But they had requested that I put that in, so I did. And that, I then removed it when I had a discussion with Ron, and I went back to him and said, look, it's going to cost you $1,000 to find out, not a whole lot. What do you want to do? And they did not want to come up with $1,000, and neither did I, so I said, fine, we'll stop that.
And, I mean, Mike can speak for the board. I mean, I think we're trying to do the you know, every indication we have is Vernon wants us to try to have school choice continue as far into the future as possible. And, you know, a vote in August may change that opinion, but I think we've been trying to do our best in the best interest of the residents of Vernon. So, you know, sometimes we make decisions that are made quickly at a board meeting based on the information that we receive at that meeting. And just a reminder, the select board was there as well, and they were part of the discussions at that particular meeting. But I think we are trying to do the best we can, and we thought that we needed to make a decision before the Act 46 study committee that week.
And also the letter that was generated, the legal opinion that we received in September from Donna saying that we were open to constitutional challenge if we were a district that joined with other districts, that someone could challenge on an equity issue, and that if we belonged to different, if we grouped with other districts that did not have school choice, the other districts or anyone in the state could say, why did they get school choice? And this path, as Ron described as option one, was Donna's. When I met with her and talked with her, this was her simplest solution, which is actually a complicated solution, but this was the best protection for Vernon to maintain school choice, because what would happen is if we vote to be removed from the union and that vote is passed, it's in the affirmative, what would then happen is we would be operating a K through 6 elementary school, and we would be tuitioning 7 through 12, but we would be an independent district. And that was also what Rebecca Holcomb recommended to me back in December. We had a legislative briefing, and at that briefing I explained Vernon's situation. It was in the Wellett House. There was 150 of us there. And I asked, this is Vernon's situation. We have a charter that says this. We have it in legislation that says we have school choice, blah, blah, blah. And she said that we would still be liable for that challenge, that constitutional challenge. So her recommendation was to become an alternative district of our own and to get ourselves removed from the high school union. We have no reason to believe at this point that she would change her mind and tell us that it wasn't a proper structure.
I mean, at the risk of opening a can of worms, as I'm speaking for myself as an individual and as a person sitting on the study committee, I think it could have been handled in a much more civilized way. The study committee has worked really hard to have really good dialogue with each other and be respectful of each other's schools and cultures, and just the way it was handled at the very end with Vernon when we were trying to work with you, it didn't feel good.
Well, what didn't feel good to Vernon was that not being necessary, all of a sudden we're all advisory or advisables. Once we were advisables, you're dragged in whether you like it or not. When we were necessary, we had some protection. The other thing is, from day one, we didn't believe that the study committee that we were voting for had this autonomy and this authority to supersede boards and towns' actions. We still don't agree with that. And I don't think we ever will. And the only place it'll be solved is in court. And I would prefer we're not the people to take it to court.
And I can say, as a participant, not of the committee, but being there watching some of the committees, I saw in one swoop that Vernon's school choice went from 10 years, and I don't know to this day where the 10 years came from in the first place, down to 5 years, with one person saying, my board doesn't like it, and another one agreed, and it was gone. So how can we, as a board, feel that we could get to keep school choice when in less than 2 minutes it was taken away from us on the committee?
I have to say about that, I was really disappointed from the letter that we got from Donna Russo Savage in September, talking about our plan that would preserve Vernon's choice, to a memo in February that says, no, that's out the window. that changed everything. So, you know, I think people were scrambling after that, and it was really disappointing that the state changed their whole opinion, where we were working from November throughout, good faith. And I'd had discussions with Vernon about this, that, you know, we wanted to preserve that. So it felt like we could do it. And then all of a sudden in February, I remember it was the first week in February, we had a meeting, and I got the thing like that day. It was very disappointing. So, I don't know, there's a lot of frustration.
And seeing that change that quickly, Vernon felt that we needed to do something to protect our school and our school choice, and that's why we did it.
Well, that happened, I mean, we can talk about this at the study committee, but that happened after it became clear that Vernon was not interested in participating. So in order to help move things along, you know, there was conversation. I don't know if you were at the meeting or not, but there was.
Well, our point of view was, though, that Vernon's intention is to keep school choice going forward.
Yeah.
And there are pieces of legislation that have been drafted and they'll be redrafted next year that will allow schools to continue school choice. I think what was frustrating to us also was to see that this body that we don't recognize as being the authoritative body that it believes it is, or that the secretary believes it is, saying Vernon can keep school choice for 10 years, or Vernon can keep school choice for 5 years, when in point of fact, we could put that in the articles and say Vernon has school choice for 10 years. Great. And when somebody files that constitutional challenge, that goes out the window. So for that to be offered up, from our standpoint, was ludicrous, because it was of no value to us whatsoever. It was a nice gesture, and we understood that there was an air of cooperation and we were trying to get resolution, but certainly it was frustrating to us to say, wait a minute, this is not what we need. And I think Ron tonight is talking about what we need to have happen.
But I think the meeting going forward, next Tuesday will be helpful. We have a study committee meeting this Thursday. The only other thing I think I need to have Marisa talk about, I keep getting these questions. In the study committee report, in the introductory paragraph, we talk about potential cost savings. We cite the $300,000 that was saved through the special ed consolidation. And I know every once in a while somebody says, well, but that wasn't real numbers. And I gotta tell you, so I'm gonna turn it over to Marisa to again give you some real numbers, because I think these questions keep coming up.
Before we go off of that, so if I understand correctly, what would happen then with Vernon's situation, we would essentially say, and I've got to be wrong in this, what I'm understanding is that we're going to essentially say Vernon is going to be part of us, but they get school choice.
We're
They're just
saying
going to
that
send people in.
Vernon would make a decision to warn a meeting to leave the unified high school district. If that's an affirmative, they are a separate K-12 district that would have the right to tuition to BUHS, but also maintain their school choice. And the rest of the districts would have the ability to vote like a month and a half later, let's say November, to form a unified union district.
Without
That.
What's being said then is Vernon, and then Vernon gets to do what they're doing now, they would still be part of the supervisory union?
No, what would happen is Vernon would become a K. Right now, what throws a wrench into all of it is we're the only school in the state that belongs to a high school union and has school choice, which Donna has pointed out is a conflict. So to resolve the conflict, we would remove ourselves from this high school union. In doing that, we would be an operating K through 6. So our school and board and everything would stay exactly the way it is right now in Vernon. The difference would be, as a non-member of the high school union, we would be a 7 through 12 tuitioning town. And our students could go to schools as they choose now. And for our supervisory unions services, we would contract basically as we do now. We would pay for the same services we receive, probably at the same rate, and move forward with that. So it would also require that we negotiate a contract with the supervisory union.
So I'm going to say that now, I'm going to identify might want to do that, and Putney not want to do that, and Guilford, why don't all the rest of the towns want to do the same thing?
I think in 2 years, Vernon's gonna see financially, this doesn't make sense. That's happened throughout the state. I don't think Guilford, I know Guilford from discussions with their board in forums, realizes the program development, the program expansion that occurs in a unified district. Dummerston should see that as well. If school districts want to go alone and think they're going to be better off, financially, they're not.
You're not really alone, you're still in the union.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
Not if the union forms, not if there's a new union that forms. So the big difference is all of those illustrations that we've done over the several months of the study committee, which is you're subject to a state funding formula that distributes costs over a much smaller number of students. It's going to create a much higher cost per student and a higher tax rate. And as towns go beyond those threshold or those penalty levels, it's been a barrier to program development. But then there, they would be subject to the state board review that says 2019, if a town hasn't done what Vernon has done, which is to either take action and try to affiliate, you mentioned maybe affiliate with other organized, structured entities, then the state board will, make their assessment on what is in the best interest of the students. In that.
But there also is, there's differences of opinion on to whether schools will save money in the end or not. Some analysis shown that the savings are going to be short-lived and short-term. There are other more optimistic projections that say it's going to be further out into the future. But I think for Vernon, we're looking at maintaining a school choice tradition that's been here since our students went to Mount Herman. That was their high school. And continuing that into the future, as well as there are people in town, a number of people that aren't comfortable with suddenly we don't have ownership of our building. Suddenly we don't control our own staff. There is that local control issue that people are also concerned about. I mean, it's the same thing if you look at the statute or the Articles of Agreement, and if you look at Guilford, for instance. Guilford is guaranteed for 5 years that nothing will happen to their school. In point of fact, at the end of the 5 years, they can vote, but it's a non-binding vote, and it's the body that decides. If I were on the Guilford board, my recommendation would be that in the Articles of Agreement, it'd be something like it takes an affirmative vote of the town to close a school. Because if you look at the history of Guilford, Guilford is a pretty wise town. When they saw that it wasn't feasible to keep their middle school open, they made the choice. And I think I'm more trusting of local control, and I would think that if they maintained that and they had the ability to say, we are examining our school, and then the town decided to close the school by an affirmative vote of the town, I believe that's the way it should operate. And it's a philosophical position, and I know other people have a different opinion, but that is my opinion, and I state it as my opinion alone. And I wouldn't speak for the Guilford Board, nor would I speak for Dummerston or Brattleboro or anyone else. It's just, I have my views on what individual towns should be doing, but I'm the chair of the Vernon Board, and that's who I represent. I represent the people in the town of Vernon and the students of Vernon. So I would be willing to meet with the Guilford Board and share my thoughts with them if they so felt, because I'm also their representative in the legislature and feel out what they would like to see happen in the future. But certainly much of what we've discussed tonight will be changing dramatically next year.
And so I'm going to turn it over to Walter, but I just want to say two things. One is I hope that the Vernon Board does not feel like any of the actions of the study committee were meant to be punitive, because they weren't. We were trying to, work together as a compromise, and I think that will always be there, because, you know, it's a nice group. And then the town vote, that was discussed, so, as a study committee, so. And Walter, what do you?
And just two very quick points. And what Ron says, or Ron and Frank said, may very well be true. If we jump out and then we start to see how we're interacting with a district that's formed, we see that our students are not getting the advantages both on at the teaching and learning level, but also the residents of Vernon on our tax rate. There may be a discussion at that point saying that that's more important than us continuing choice into the future. That could absolutely happen, especially if who knows what the tax rates will look like. But even earlier, before, let's say in August, we take a vote. I mean, you know, we talk about, you know, we would be able to contract with the district. The residents of Vernon need to know, does that mean our teachers can still be in the union? And, you know, because we continue to talk about our support staff joining the union. There's all of those sort of details that we would have to have clearly laid out for our residents to truly make a decision. School choice is worth us pulling out and going it alone. And I think Frank's point about FY19, you know, who knows? We may pull out and then have, you know, there may be a hard stop at some point where we have no choice but to join up with someone else.
This gives us the opportunity, though, to research all that, to get all the information we need, to find out what is best for our town and our students.
And Amy, I don't think anyone on the board felt that it was punitive action being taken by the committee.
Okay.
What we felt is, and I voted against Act 46, as many of actually I think almost everybody in the county did, because we saw it differently than a lot of other people. You know, if you're a St. Johnsbury where they already have this set up and it changes nothing, it's a very easy move. And if you go back and look at the roll call vote, it was pretty much urban versus rural, with the rural community saying, no, we don't like this. And for many of us, we think it was an overreach by the state, and that's why this year there were 12 different pieces of legislation filed. They never got off the committee's wall because the chair decided he didn't want to take up any issues on Act 46. The only one issue that was changed, and it speaks to something that Frank said, the thresholds. They did away with the thresholds. And in doing that, it kind of opens up a whole new can of worms, because there's no threshold, so there's no spending cap for that year, so people can kind of go crazy. But you also had that 5% cap, if you remember, which would be a huge benefit if we all unified, and then we could spend whatever we want and never have to worry about going over 5% in our tax rate. We were protected, and everybody else in the state had to pick it up. On the very last day of session, that changed. The Senate voted that out. That's how fluid this bill is. During the session, it could change day to day. And if you talk to members on the Ed Committee, and if you talk to people from the Agency of Ed or the Board of Ed, you got varying viewpoints on what every particular article in that bill, it was no longer a bill, it's an act now, Act 46. There were different viewpoints on what it said. I had members of the committee saying, no, that was not our intention. We didn't intend when we wrote that, that's not the intention of the law. Well, the intent doesn't matter. It's what somebody determines the words mean, and that's why I said Secretary Holcomb she's entitled to her opinion, but she is not the final arbiter of this. The courts would be. And as I said, Vernon, we've always enjoyed a great partnership. We want to continue that partnership. That's why we've been working with Ron to come up with a solution that works for everyone, and I think we have. And if other towns decided to look at other options, that's up to them. We're not discouraging or encouraging other towns to do anything else. We're looking at what we've heard from the citizens of Vernon and from the parents of Vernon, what they would like to see continue. And that's as far as we're going. We are looking for what Vernon is interested in. That's our job. That's why we're elected, is to look out for the taxpayers and the students of Vernon.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have a question. My experience is that this has been a very functional supervisory union and doing a lot of really good things. I mean, in part, maybe we'll get to it when we get to this sheet, where a lot of consolidation has already happened in terms of special ed, in terms of
triple E in terms of English as a learned language, those sorts of things, where we've been consolidating different types of things. And it strikes me that the jump to a totally unified is just expanding that further. And so there are costs and benefits, along the way that has to be balanced. One way to maybe make it, and responding to some of the other comments and Walter's, is if Vernon were to go off on their own, would they have to hire their own special ed? Would they have to hire their own? So they wouldn't. So that would continue. So they would contract. So it would be, so at this meeting next year, that table wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be meeting in this school. So, but then it would be negotiated maybe through the finance committee.
Well, no, I think it would be, we look at the overall assessment, and they would have the same assessment as any member district. We would calculate that. Now, in terms of special ed, I think that's
somewhat different in terms of the finance committee, for example. There would no longer be a Vernon.
right. There would not be a representative.
Representative. And
So they would
fairness.
negotiate with
Yes,
us.
okay. So, so you'd be losing a little bit of voice in the relationship with the supervisory union. Whether we unify or whether, if you left it would stay the same. So there'd be a little less voice, but you'd have more voice in your own. So there are those trade-offs, which I think you'll get to, and I hear you completely about. I mean, I've served on the town boards, and I've served on the high school board now for, this is my 6th year now, about 8 years on town board. And there are very different issues and a different level of looking at things. And so there would be some losses from any town coming in, but there would certainly be gains, and those are what I would hope that the study committee, and then eventually, if it got to a vote, what each town would be looking at and comparing what's lost, what's gained, and what you think. I mean, ultimately, I think whatever happens, we're a bunch of goodwill people that care about our kids, and that's what ultimately we care about, and our kids is all of our kids. So I think whatever happens will work.
Yeah, I mean, to move this along, this was legislation that forced us to consolidate special ed. We weren't really thrilled about this. But as we worked through the requirements, we felt like we could make it work, and it worked really well. And I've said it wasn't our intention to save money. We did save it. Reese's going to go through that. But it was our intention to share resources and improve our programs. And I know we've done that. So I'm going to give Lisa about 5 to 10 minutes
And Ron's right. I mean, it was a hard process to go through, and I would say it probably took us a solid 2 years to really work through how we would consolidate. What I have on this paper is sort of where we evolved to in our planning. So as we were planning for this budget that we made for 2017, some of the things that we've changed about how we look at students is to really look at a real analysis of IEPs for every student to see what they need, what kinds of services, in an effort to, one, support the MTSS effort, that we're not just providing special ed services to every kid that struggles, but also to really understand each one of our students who do have IEPs, what do they really need. And I feel like we did the best job of that so far this year in the preparation of this budget, because we came up with a way to really analyze that process with the help of Frank. So we want to continue that. We find that that's really helpful. One of the outcomes of it is that we were able to make reductions, 3 teachers, 7 paras, and you can see that's $190,000 of savings in those positions. And then we have students that we're bringing back from tuition programs out of district. at another 104. So there's at least an anticipated savings for going into this 2017 budget of $294,000. And I will say that that's, you know, we have kids moving in and out constantly right now. So it definitely is a moving target, but I feel like the staffing piece is pretty solid. The tuition piece is a little less, or a little more fluid. And we've been able to think about how to provide services on an SU-wide basis. For example, the STEP program. That has been in Brattleboro Town Schools, piloted at Academy, Oak Grove, and Green Street have done versions of that. And now we're going to really make this an SU service. And you know, our hopes for that is that we'll have the same outcomes at an SU level, where we're really helping teachers figure out how do we deal with kids in our classroom whenever they're really struggling. What are some strategies we can have within the classroom to make things smoother and engage students? How do we unify behavior support so that we can really make sure that there's a positive impact on student learning? So we've seen those outcomes in Brattleboro Town, and we want to improve what's going on in Brattleboro Town and also for the entire SU. And again, that's you know, it's going to be at least a 3-year process to really get it up and running fully. But the focus is to have systems that are equitable for all of the students that are in Wyndham Southeast, so that it's not an inequitable system where, you know, Academy School gets all this great service, but Guilford, we don't get that. You know, so this is a way that we're really working at making special ed services and supports equitable. So that's my 3-minute version.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Can you speak to the savings that were generated in FY15 as well as FY16?
Yes. I asked that question to Frank while he was
Yep.
speaking. I know part of it was out-of-district placements that we brought in. The staff ratio, the teacher-to-student ratio had been something like 1 staff member to every 7.5 teachers, and so we've increased that to 1 to 12. And in some cases, a little higher. And those case management loads are pretty reasonable. Throughout the state, probably 15 could be the average in some districts. And I think gradually, you know, we may get there, but I think in terms of serving the students, we felt like an incremental step made sense. And that's where 300,000 free came from. Out of
So that's 15. FY15.
FY16.
We're in 16.
No, we're talking about,
You're talking about 17.
this looks like
This
7,
is 17.
8. Yeah.
I'm asking about what were the savings in 15 and 16,
Well, I know the previous year to this was 300,000.
which is 15.
Right, we're still in the current fiscal
We're in
year.
16.
So we haven't closed the books
Oh, I
yet
see.
for the current year.
So we're within FY.
So what was the budgeted savings for 16?
What do you mean by budgeted
Well,
savings?
this is an estimate of budgeted savings for 17, so I was curious as to what your planning was for 16, what that savings
The
was.
16 budget was similar to the 15 budget. It was relatively level spending for special ed.
So no incremental savings for 16.
We don't see a continuous decline in spending in special ed, but as Marisa is saying, we do see that over a 3-year cycle, these programs that are taking root and getting tested and implemented are showing the effects that we expect, and that will continue to stabilize costs. We don't see us continually reducing costs in perpetuity. But we do see this lending better outcomes and a stable cost structure. And in some segments, like Marisa just said, instead of an outside placement to Brattleboro Retreat or to one of the many private providers, you know, these programs are intended to bring those students back and/or prevent the outside placement.
And I think that in 15-16, we didn't make a big cut in the budget.
because we were just getting up and running with the unified special ed. That was like the second year. But what happened was, the outcome was, whenever we were finished with the budget, we had this savings that we didn't anticipate. We didn't anticipate it was going to be as much as it was. So that gave me the ability to then look at the budget and say, so we can make some cuts because we see that we don't really need all of that service. And if we're doing it in a wiser way with how we're supporting students, which I feel like now we really are being much smarter and wiser about how we are thinking about providing special ed services to students. And I have to say, this is also very much in line with the multi-tiered systems of support, because each one of the schools is implementing a much more broad spectrum of supports and services for students, where in the past, any kid that had a different learning need, it was like, that's special ed. But now, schools on their own are making those decisions of, we can take care of that kid. We don't have to refer them for special education. We have the ability to provide instruction and interventions that the students need.
And I think a big part of that is the work that Paul has done with our math curriculum, and also Brian Bittner with our literacy, certainly Lyle, Shelley Wilson, in terms of working with the behavioral issues in the schools, and Greg Stoller. That's where you're sharing the resources to get some sort of impact.
So probably to your point, Dan, you'd like to see a number quantified for FY16 once this year gets done.
Well, I've been looking for FY15 for, as several other people have, for months, and we haven't been able to see that. So I see your proposed for 17. So yeah, I would love to see 15, where it came from, which district it came from.
Yep.
And then also for 16, we're almost done with 16. So yeah, I'd love to see how 16 shaped out too.
So fiscal year 15 has been published for quite a while. It's in all the town reports. You can go in and...
Yeah, but it doesn't identify where this
You
is.
can look at special education programming in all of our annual reports, and you'll see the spending, you'll see the variance budget versus actual. So you will see the savings, and they've been there. I know when I've had a couple of requests for data, it's a matter of reminding certain folks that they already have the data, but I'm happy to resend it. But
that'd be great.
A little later, you'll see when we go through the audit report, we'll look at the Wyndham Southeast portion of special ed against budget. You'll see this same favorable variance that's, as I said, in all of the town reports, and it's been out for several months.
So maybe a list, I mean, sort of expanded that goes over 3 years might be helpful, if that's possible. And that maybe quell questions about the reality of the numbers.
That can be done. Part of the challenge is what's being illustrated is that you are dealing with 7 separate entities, right. seven separate general ledgers, 7 separate employers, and in some instances before the centralization, very different models of administering special education. So when you go back 3 years, you're starting to collect totally disparate system data, and but this illustrates, again, why a centralized system allows for good analysis, good accountability, good conversations about our programs working or not. When we piece it out in these small autonomous units, it's just much more difficult to answer the question, because you're looking at different standards, different timelines, and in some instances, different contracts.
Okay. Amy? Yes.
Question. I've always been really impressed with the special education services that we've provided as a district, and how we've shared resources, and especially for those students that are really learning impaired. And I'm not sure how that fits into this, but I hope that we're not jeopardizing their opportunities by limiting access to safe learning environments in the name of sending them back to their towns. I'm speaking of Oak Grove
Yeah.
and the classrooms that are there. They really have served a purpose for students from all of our schools to go. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that those children are going to be able to really access learning. I mean, they're all different, but there's some that are really impaired.
Well, I think, and it's great that you brought up Oak Grove, because those two classrooms were completely segregated for many, many years. They didn't even have lunch with their peers. Now those students are in classrooms whenever they're able to participate in reading or math or one of the, art. They're there. They're part of that group. So we are really looking at each child and what can they handle. And we will always have to have some classrooms that are more restrictive, because that's what those students need. We're not talking about eliminating everything. That would be unfair to students if we did that.
And so we have the intensive service program in Dummerston, and then we have a similar program at high school that we maintain along with those classrooms at Oak Grove.
I'd just like to say that they did eat lunch with the other students, and they were really welcomed and celebrated, even though they had a separate classroom. You know, often if a student was able to, they would come. This is years ago.
Yeah.
You know, we would try to make sure that they could come into the regular classroom for whatever they could handle. But they were really celebrated, and everybody in the school loved them and supported them. And it was really a nice, safe place for them to learn. So I would hate to see that jeopardized for money.
Right, no place.
Any additional questions, comments, concerns?
Again, we'll have a meeting, study committee meeting this Thursday.
This Thursday, yeah. And it's
Is Asshole coming to that meeting?
He's not.
Be Skyping in or anything?
No, he's unavailable. I think I've got a message to him for a tentative meeting on June 16th. But we need to talk about that with the study committee.
So the study committee meeting on Thursday is where? Okay, all right. Okay. So we go on to policies. Excuse me. And the first one made me smile. I think it was, I don't know if it was Mark or Russ that talked about the policy on policy at one of our last gatherings, and by golly, here it is. A1. And this
So
is,
these are the first readings of 5 policies? 4.
so we'll go from one by one. Is that all right, or do you want to? Does anybody have any concerns or questions about A1, D2, D12, and G7?
Clarification, these are, in all cases, policies that have come down from the state level, essentially, and models from the state level and on down. There's nothing that's really localized other than the first statement in most of them.
Right, and we actually adopted the role of policy to create SU-wide policy probably about 5 years ago. It looks like it was updated recently in 2015. So there might be some changes based on statute that we have for that one. But that's worked out pretty well for us. The next one, D2, professional development. Again, that's a model policy which we have implemented. And again, as a supervisory union, I think we work really well on professional development policy. Next one is the D12 harassment Prevention of harassment for employees, so that's an updated policy based on state statutes. It's pretty similar to what we've had. A few changes. And then G7, educational support system. That's really governed by state board rules and the legal references on that page. So we follow that. We just need to make sure we update that policy.
Can you remind us all what the policy is on adopting policy? We read them once and then come back.
We'll bring it back to the next meeting.
We vote at that point.
Obviously, adopting policies and policies.
I believe so, yeah.
That is the policy. So this would be essentially the first reading, and with the SU policies, we have enough time between meetings that you come back and adopt them. If there's questions, we can hold off on adoptions with particular questions.
Yes, Walter?
Oh, I'm just wondering if the district is looking at complying with the President Obama's request for gender-neutral restrooms, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's come up from the BUHS board just recently. And quite frankly, the principals answered it that we've actually been doing that for years. At the high school, if somebody identifies by a particular gender, they use the bathroom that they identify. At the elementary levels, in all the schools, you know, we do have transgender students, and you know, we work through that as well. Never had a complaint on it. Principals are pretty open and understanding. Staff certainly is. Some schools will set up a neutral bathroom and identify that if needed. Some will make the nurses' bathroom available if needed. But I think in most cases, the kids do a really good job with this, and the staff supports this.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions or comments on the policies, we'll consider that our first reading and go on to new business. The election of superintendent of schools.
These are all things that have to happen.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, these are things that traditionally do happen, but by statute they don't, because, read the first one, and I've made this point.
I move that Ron Staley be elected superintendent of schools for the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union for the ensuing year.
I'll second that.
So let's say you voted against that. It comes up every year. I have a contract that runs through next year, so you could vote negative to this, but you're still gonna pay me your contract. It'd be fine with me. So it's kind of one of these outdated traditions. I think the next one has, again, with Frank,
yeah.
as the treasurer, is it?
Business administrator and treasurer.
Yeah, you know, he's got a multi-year contract. So I think next year we're gonna get away with from these and just cycle statute. Anyway,
So-
it's in force this time, so.
Okay, can I officially make that motion?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right, so we have the motion for Ron to be superintendent of schools, Ruth seconded.
Can we do all?
Any discussion?
Can we do them all at once?
It's just
Okay.
two.
Okay. I also, so we're gonna do all of
Yeah.
this, okay, all right, so Ruth, you okay with this?
I am
Okay.
fine with it.
Okay, I'm also gonna move that Frank Recker be elected as business administrator and treasurer for the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union for the ensuing year. Additionally, I move that the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union authorize the superintendent of schools to employ central office administration and staff as is necessary to conduct the business of the supervisory union. All of the hiring is to be within the limits of the approved budget and with the approval of the WSESU Finance, Compensation, Evaluation, Goals Committee with WSESU Board ratification to follow. And finally, I move that the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union be authorized to accept federal, state, private grants and aid for the 2016-2017 year to include, but not be limited to, the following: Title I, Title VI, Title II, Medicaid monies, math science grants, Title IV, drug-free schools grants, IDEA federal special education funds, school age and preschool funds, Act 230, and other grants deemed appropriate by the board and administration.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, thank you. And now,
Would you email that to me?
yes, yeah.
It'd be easier to copy and paste.
Yep. Yeah. And then, summer food program, bid? That's on-
Yes, could we have a motion to approve the summer food program and the bid award to Cafe Service?
Second.
Is that just, is that just for Town, or where is that?
This is for 17 sites throughout Wyndham, Southeast region. It's 2 additional sites from what occurred last year. So these sites are, as I say, in multiple locations. Most of them are open to any student. So you could be from Massachusetts. And so generally, these are traditional sites that have been in place for 2 years.
Frank, is there a site in Putney, a site in Dummerston, a site in Vernon?
No, I don't think so. I think most of the sites are in the general Brattleboro area, but locations like Warcourt, Ledgewood Heights, the rec department, the memorial pool, Brooks Memorial. But as I say, you know, students can, from any, and many do, from many other communities, attend. And there's 23,000 meals served. Reimbursement is about 57,000. There are some donations, but it's all essentially reimbursed through the child nutrition program from the student's point of view. Adults would have to pay if they chose.
Frank, didn't the Brattleboro board vote on this in the past?
I don't think the Brattleboro board specifically votes on this. There is a Brattleboro, there's an article in the Brattleboro warning for the representative town meeting to contribute $6,000 for this program, and that was approved.
So did the rest of the town provide some money to that?
This is primarily funded through the child nutrition program, so there is no additional cost.
Except for our 6,000.
Yeah.
There's no cost to Vernon?
No cost to any town, except it's the town of Brattleboro that has taken this initiative. It's not the school district.
And that was because historically, Brattleboro Town, this municipality funded some of those programs. And it was probably 3 or 4 years ago,
Yeah.
they asked the school to take it on, and that's where we had specific clarification with the town board, school board to approve that.
There was some history there.
Yeah.
Any further discussion or questions?
The kickoff event, it's this Friday? A week from Friday.
Yes, Ruth.
Boys and Girls Club? June 3rd?
If one of the outlying towns should happen to feel that they wanted to have a site, how would they go about requesting one, getting one?
Yeah, Guilford did this
We tried it
a couple of
for
years
2
ago.
years.
We did a pilot.
And it just didn't seem like it enough.
There's,
We tried to bus kids, we tried to go, literally go pick them up and bring them, and there wasn't enough call to
But I'm not asking for Dummerston because we're in the same boat that you are in Guilford, that we're all spread out. We have our own called Alice's Lunch, where we deliver lunch food to families. But like Putney and Vernon both have swimming pools, recreation areas. And in a lot of towns, that's where the kids congregate and where they serve these lunches. And so I was just asking for specific, I guess, for those towns, if they wanted to.
Sure, Kara Sawyer-Hardigan in our office would be the person. She runs the summer meals program.
Okay.
Just call the central office and ask for Kara.
She works with the principals too.
Okay.
Kind of identifying.
I was just curious as to how that would work.
Any additional questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of awarding the summer food program bid to Cafe Services at the 17 sites within WSESU, please say aye. Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Okay. We move on to meeting schedule.
We would schedule a meeting, one more meeting in June. This group? Yeah. So we'll think about your existing board schedules and then kind of come up with a date, float the date, see how that works. We'll confer, but we may not need another meeting, but if we do, we'll get you some dates.
Okay.
Why do you think we'd need one?
No, we'll, sorry?
Why do you think we'd need one, possibly?
Yeah, I think we've covered the things that we typically do in the spring, so I don't think we do need it.
Can I have a request to schedule these things? If we typically know we're gonna need 2 or 3 or whatever the SU meetings during the year, could we just schedule them at one fell swoop? I am continually taken by surprise by these meetings.
So the October one is usually the second week of October, and then the December one is with the budget, and that's probably the second week in December.
So can we just put
This
dates on
one-
now?
I don't know. Let us work on
We
a,
did that, then you have to commit.
yeah, let us work on a tentative schedule,
Okay.
but we'll get it to you. That's just
Please don't move the October one until after Columbus Day.
I'll say Dummerson's busy then, huh?
We are a little busy then.
But we'll come up making apple pies.
Maybe they have to provide.
So this year was a Tuesday after Columbus Day.
Yes, I know.
Or
That was
fall
very
foliage day,
nice,
we call
thank
it.
you.
So maybe we'll do the same type of scenario.
She has support in some way.
No, I think after they bring the refreshments.
So what day is that?
Well,
She's gonna get back.
yeah.
Okay, all right, what do you think, you know? Okay. So next one potentially in June, question mark, definitely October and December, typically the second weeks.
What date is it, October?
They're not.
You're not sure?
They're going to send it to
The
us.
11th or the 18th?
I'm gonna give it to you now.
Good. Yes.
October 11th. December 15th, no? I already have it. December 15th. No, that's the wrong year, sorry. No, that's right. All right, December 15th.
That's a Thursday?
It's a Thursday. I don't know when it's spring.
Okay, so October 11th, and where would it be on the 11th of October?
Dummerston, Tuesday,
Dummerston, okay,
and Thursday, Putney.
okay. Okay. Thank you. Audit. SU audit.
Okay, so I, excuse me. Got something in the throat.
You might have to go. Yeah, 8:30, you have 8:30.
Yeah.
Shut down.
Okay. So earlier this evening, I definitely.
Adjourn to adjourn.
Do you want me to do something else when Frank will use the provider?
Yeah.
Well, under other, I'd like to talk, unless, Ron, you have decided that you're enjoying us and you're no longer going to retire.
No, my intention is to finish after next year. That would have been an executive session, but since we asked.
Well, you've said it before, right?
No, I've said that to the SU Finance Committee. They were looking at my contract. Typically, I would have had a 3-year contract, and I asked for just 2 years because my intention is to finish next year.
So
So what I'll be doing is, what?
Are you saying you're going to hear it?
I'm retiring after next year.
So what, after the school year?
Yeah.
So like July of 2000?
June 30th.
June 30th.
2017.
Thank you.
So what I'll be doing is working with the SU Finance Evaluation Committee to set up a process. I'm going to actually start talking to them this Wednesday. And then probably have another meeting in June, start thinking about a process that would happen in the fall.
Because I personally think we have big shoes to fill when you leave, Ron, and that we've been with you for how many years?
15 years.
And I asked around, and it doesn't seem that anybody was here, unless I missed somebody, but that this is a process that none of us are actually familiar with.
I was here.
Mike
I was
Hebert-
here. All right, good, so somebody then, but,
Well, Mike Hebert was on the hiring committee.
I was too.
all right, good, then there's 3, but there's not a lot of us, so, and my understanding from people is that it could take at least a year to go through this process.
If you start in the fall next year, you'll have a candidate selected by March 1st. I mean, I've been involved in these searches for principals and superintendents, my own, and served on committees for other superintendencies. It's a 6-month process.
How many are vacant right now in our state? I thought it was really high. They said that.
There's always a turnover about 30% in this one.
The turnover is really high.
As there is in principal, but it really hasn't been in our district.
And so you're going to talk to all of us about what the process is, or how? What,
At some point, but what the finance committee is really the compensation and evaluation committee that works with me directly. So I'll talk with them first, formulate a strategy, and that will be shared to all of us.
I think we want to move along.
So Ron, along with superintendent. Now, in the time I've been here, we've had 3 superintendents in 30 years, which speaks well to supervisory union because other supervisory unions roll them over
Every 3 years.
like they do in a garden.
Yeah.
So we have a highly functioning supervisory union, and that's one of the things that we can appreciate as supervisory union. Nobody, Cusick was on before I came out, so in 40 years, we've had 3 superintendents.
And one guy in position, right?
That was Cusick, and that is absolutely amazing.
he
There's
was
no
serving
other,
his
there's no
15th
other
year.
supervisory union with that kind of record.
I don't think Ron intends to die with
We might kill him yet.
Not the plan.
We might kill you yet.
Yeah. Still a chance, right?
All right, Frank, are you recovered?
I think so. I don't know what that was. Maybe a bug? Who knows? Okay, so I gave you the audit report for Wyndham Southeast, June of 2030. This is on the website, and if I do have a couple of extra copies if folks would like. Did you folks have one?
Walter has one.
I have a
Anyone else? If you like an extra, we'll zap it around. But as I say, it's also on the website, the Wyndham Southeast website. So I know it's late, so I'll do a very brief overview, but I'm glad to answer any questions you might have. The audit is by Tyler Sims out of Lebanon. This is the 2nd year they've completed the audits for our supervisory union and for all of our school districts. If you're following along in the document, the third page is the opinion that we like to see, essentially saying that the financial reporting is in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. It's an unqualified opinion. That's what we expect. Within the financial report, you'll see something called a management discussion and analysis. If we go to the balance sheet that we all have in our school districts as well as the SU, the balance sheet gives us really the measure of solvency, states the assets of the supervisory union, the liabilities, and then the difference, fund balance. So our assets, $2,259,000. Liabilities, $1,460,000. Fund balance, $799,000. That change, the change in assets, I'm on page 12. The change in fund balance was $119,000.
What page are you on, Frank?
So I just read the balance sheet on page 12. The balance sheet on page 12, and then I referred to the change in fund balance. You know, fund balance is the best measure of fiscal solvency. Difference between assets and liabilities. And the change in that from fiscal year 14 to fiscal year 15 was $119,000, which is less than 1% variance from year to year. And typically the supervisory union proposes a balanced budget, so we had a favorable variance overall. So that's a sort of a quick snapshot of the fiscal solvency and the auditor's opinion that the financial statements reflect generally acceptable accounting principles. Page 14 also provides the revenue and expense summary. Revenues $15,024,000 and expenses $14,955,000. That's how we get that $119,000 surplus. And as you may recall, this supervisory union is budget and the fiscal year end is quite a bit more activity as of fiscal year 15 than in the prior year, because this is the year that special education was consolidated. That's why you may remember numbers more like 6 or 7 million in previous annual reports. But we went through this, you did before I was here, fiscal year 15, and then with my participation, fiscal year 16, and then just this past December, we put in place fiscal year 17. So a couple other points to share with you. You know, unlike a school district, supervisory union does not own buildings. Page 23 shows the capital assets. It's net of depreciation. It's $105,000. You know, so that reflects mainly computers and office equipment, but no buildings. There's a substantial increase in all of the audit reports this year, and some of our towns publish the audit reports within their budget book, like UHS and Brattleboro Town. Others, you would see these at the town offices. But the large addition is in the pension plan disclosure. So the Governmental Accounting Standards Board has required additional reporting. So there's typically about a 14-page footnote in all of the audits, including this one. Starts on page 24. And what it's doing is drawing attention to the funding of the teacher retirement and the municipal retirement plans. And it does illustrate that they are underfunded. at the state level, and it's identifying the degree of underfunding, and there are new contributions that are being required to address that problem. So if you're interested in that, you can review that in footnote 7 for several pages. A couple other points that you may be interested in on page 41 is the comparison on one page of the budget versus the actual. So we had a budget of $15,024,000. Our actual was $14,350,000. So we were quite favorable against budget. Now keep in mind, this is just the supervisory union. There's 6 other entities with their own budget variances, but earlier we had talked about special ed, and here's the special ed program illustration of budget versus actual. Budget was $6,764,000 for fiscal year 15. Actual was $6,268,000. So that was a favorable variance of about $500,000. You know, some districts didn't have a variance to that extent. Overall, as we have discussed, the total variance was closer to $300,000. But in the SU, it was a favorable variance of $496,000, as you see there on page 41. When you compare revenues versus expenses, though, we're back to the $119,000 that I had started with in terms of change in fund balance. We received $119,000 more in revenues than we spent. So page 42 just it's an odd sequence of reports, but it just happens to be the next item in the audit, and that page identifies the difference between fully funding the pension fund for the teacher retirement in 2014 and the actual contribution by the state. So it illustrates that the contribution to fund the retirement plan for that year would have been $218,000, and the state actually paid in $173,000 or $44,000 short. So as I said, the disclosure requirements around the governmental accounting rule 67 is bringing much more attention to this issue, and it seems to be having an effect.
I have a question on this one. Is
Yep.
this deficiency and lack of fully funding the retirement brought to the state's attention? You said
Well, it is their plan, it is their funding. Remember, the school district does not have an expense associated with teacher retirement. You have a teacher withholding that business office withholds from all teacher payroll and then sends it to the state. And then the state is supposed to do an appropriation based on the benefit they've extended to the teacher. They're supposed to fund that, and this is illustrating that they've been underfunding.
sort of remiss, in other words.
Yeah. The next page, though, is the municipal retirement plan, which is for the municipal employees, you know, the paraeducators, folks like me, you know, non-certified teacher. And you see that requirement has been fully funded, but in this case, there is also an employer expense to that plan. Just one more point of interest. Earlier you voted on accepting grants. On page 50 is a list of grants, and this is just a small number of the grants that we receive, but these are all the federal grants. So we receive a lot of state grants, other types of grants, private grants. But this is a list of $3,067,000 in the federal grants, associated with food service, with the Title I, with special education, and some of the student support services. And then finally, the last page is part of a management letter, and it's a schedule of audit findings. And you'll see on that page that they are indicating that we have complied with the federal requirements for managing the grants and the reporting that goes along with this. And this goes back to what Ron was saying earlier in the evening about compliments from the Agency of Education for Lyle and Paul. That there's an enormous amount of work that it takes to comply with the Office of Management and Budget, the Circular 133. It's a very extensive regulation, and it changes from year to year. And the audit review is indicating that we've met the compliance requirements, and the local state agencies confirmed that. So there's a quick review of fiscal year 15 audit report. We'll be scheduling the next audit for all of our districts toward the late August, early September.
Thank you. Walter?
Is there a separate management letter that the auditors provide?
So it starts, I think, on page 42 in here, and it is included. They used to have separate documents, and now they are included in this document. Let's see.
I think it's 46.
Is it 46?
Yeah.
So that this is the official management letter?
There it is,
built into
page
the
46, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is it typical for the audit to take all the way to the end of March for, June 30 closing?
We like to see them much earlier than that. The firm was pretty much ready to go in December, but they had the lead person was a serious family health issue that pulled them right out of the process, so it's not typical.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments? Mike?
Frank, horse is probably out of the barn now, but on the grant approval for the administration, there was that caveat we discussed about reporting to the board. Is that in what we voted? Is that language in the grant, whatever we voted on tonight?
Well, in a very broad sense, what we voted on tonight is very, very typical for a supervisory union reorganization meeting, but there is generally not a special provision that says that there is a second check-in that you would ask the superintendent to do for a grant. However, as we go through the budget process, pretty much every revenue source, which of course is going to fund a grant activity, is going to be reviewed and considered, including in that case the Asian Studies program. It's in the SU budget, and then it's in part assessed to the local district budgets.
So that paragraph we discussed in the finance committee, we're not using that?
And I'm saying that it's...
Or is it a whole different situation?
No, I'm saying that the motion that you approved here basically covers that paragraph. And that this motion here, I move that Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union be authorized to accept federal, state, private grants and aid, but not limited to. That is the authorization to move forward with planning that engages, in that case, the Freeman Foundation grant to fund a exchange development program.
Would that include Act 46 grants?
Would what include?
Would that cover grants for the Act 46 study committee by any chance?
Yep, all grants, yep.
All grants. Because I had some concerns that maybe our grant money had run out for the Act 46 study committee. And so if it relates to the study committee, I think that's something that should be discussed with the study committee.
Yeah, so that process actually took place with boards, and then when we formed the study committee, there was a list of things that we agreed to, including accessing that grant. And at that time, the worksheet really only talked about facilitation and legal counsel. We actually only used it for legal counsel. So we're hoping that with the timing, this is another incentive, with the timing as it goes ahead this fall, we would still have access to that $150,000 AOE grant, minus the legal expenses that we used. So if we wait a year after, we don't get that money.
Yeah, my only concern is that the statute calls for any funding for the study committee to be voted upon by the voters of each town. And so I would object if the vote that you made tonight would permit the WSESU to accept funding for grants for the study committee. It's just not clear to me if that is possible under the vote that you've made tonight.
So the boards approved that.
The boards approved it, yes, the initial grant.
Yep.
But so, I'm just asking a question, does this vote that you made tonight cover grants that could be passed along to the study committee? See what I'm saying?
It addresses all grants received by the supervisory union.
But not the study committee?
In this case, the $20,000 grant is received by the supervisory union.
Oh, it is, and not the study committee?
No.
The study committee is not doesn't have a tax ID number, it's not a transactional entity.
Uh-huh. That's not something I understood.
Any further questions about the audit?
I just would like to commend Frank and his office for producing a record for a clean audit, and then all the other things that have been going on, such as dealing with Act 46 and other things, and changing the coding over the last year or so. There's just been a lot going on, and Frank has done brilliantly on it, and talking about the transition from Ron to whoever is next, the transition from, what was his name? It was Jim Kane to Frank. I mean, like incredibly seamlessly. In part, Jim stayed on as a consultant, and he faded into the background, but he was there, and it's just been really remarkable to see the change. And so kudos to everyone at that table. In fact, Amy, I'll include you too.
Take a minute to compliment the staff, the business office staff. They really are remarkable, dedicated people, and your principals, your teachers know them, and it's great to see the class, the opening day in August, how what an overwhelming applause that the central office staff gets as a result of just delivering every day a really great service.
And the lack of turnover, you might be talking about the supervisor, the superintendent. I mean, I hope, how long was Jim here? I hope you're here for that long. You may not, but you're 32 more. You'll be, I don't know how much, but anyway, but the staff at central office that you're talking about, turnover is remarkably low too, which speaks highly of the functional supervisory union that we have. So thank you.
Do you need a vote to accept this report?
Wouldn't hurt. I don't think it's required. But
I move to accept the auditor's report for the year ended June 30th, 2015.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Do we have any other business?
If there's no other business, I move